Welcome into Tailgate Thursday for week number 7 of the 2024 college football season. My name is David Morrison from the Vol Society, here to preview the upcoming college football games featuring our Volunteers, the SEC, and games across the nation. And we've got a lot of games to cover. This is a very stacked week in college football. Next week will also be stacked, and we'll preview those games next week. But we begin with our beloved Tennessee Volunteers, ranked number 8 in this week's AP poll, coming off a loss last Saturday night in Fayetteville to the Arkansas Razorbacks. 19-14 was the final score. Tennessee just got beat all 3 phases of the game, and now they return back home to Neyland Stadium for the first time in a month, taking on, a lot of people considers this their biggest rival of the year. Obviously, the other big rival is next week in Alabama, but obviously, this is a game Tennessee desperately needs to win. You're taking on a team that has had your number for the last 30 years, per se, in the Florida Gators. Not too many wins in this series, as I mentioned, the last 3 decades. So a desperate win for the Volunteers. Stats-wise, Tennessee does have an advantage over Florida, but, crazier things have happened in this rivalry. So we'll see what Tennessee can do, and Josh Heupel can dial up. Meanwhile, for Florida, they've kind of been on a winning streak, per se, right now. The last 2 games they have won over Mississippi State and last Saturday night against UCF. The Billy Napier hot seat talk has kind of cooled off a little bit. So we'll see what happens. Florida's going to be using 2 quarterbacks in this game. And Graham Mertz, the quarterback that beat Tennessee last year, and then freshman quarterback DJ Lagway, who's kind of Mr. Do Everything, per se. So can Tennessee's defense really step up and pressure these 2 quarterbacks? Tennessee, I believe, is 4th in the nation as far as quarterback pressures go, so they're going to have to really bring the pressure. And, of course, can that Tennessee offense finally get clicking? Scored less than 30 points per game the last 2 games that Tennessee has went out in. So we'll see what happens. Longtime rival, the Gators and the Vols. All right, let's go across the SEC really quick. We got a lot to cover here, so it's just going to be kind of brief. But anyways, South Carolina at number 7, Alabama. Alabama coming off a shocking loss in Nashville last Saturday, 40-35. I know the college football world was rejoicing, and even some Volunteer fans was cheering for the Commodores last week. So now Alabama returns back home, taking on South Carolina, who took a loss last Saturday, 27-3 to Ole Miss. We'll see what happens in this game. Obviously for Alabama, still shaking off the loss from Vanderbilt. And meanwhile for South Carolina, trying to kind of get back on the winning track here. We'll see what happens in this game. I think Bama probably will bounce back, but anything can happen. All right, we head to the Texas State Fair for the 3:30 game on ABC at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. The number 1 team in the nation this week, the Texas Longhorns, taking on the 18th ranked Oklahoma Sooners. 3:30 on ABC. These 2 teams always meet every year at the Cotton Bowl in the Red River Shootout. Quinn Ewers is suspected to start for Texas this week. He hasn't played since September the 14th when he went out with an injury against UTSA. It's been Arch Manning along the way, but Quinn Ewers is supposed to be back for this game. Meanwhile, for OU, coming off a bye week where they lost to Tennessee. So what's going to happen with the Sooners? Michael Hawkins Jr. is still the quarterback for the Sooners, but it's Texas and Oklahoma Saturday, 3:30. 4:15 SEC Network. The Battle of the Bulldogs. Mississippi State heads to Athens to take on number 5 Georgia. Georgia coming off a win at home last week against Auburn, 31-13. Pretty simple Georgia win, bounce back after their loss to Alabama. Meanwhile, for Mississippi State, they've made a change of quarterback due to injury, as Blake Shapen has been out with an injury. So now they're rolling with Michael Van Buren Jr. at quarterback. Mississippi State, tough first season for Jeff Levy, but kind of expected. But, this is for a 1-4 team, this Mississippi State team is not awful. They're just kind of mismanaged and going to have to get some Jimmys and Joes in there eventually. But it's a Bulldog battle down in Athens, 415 SEC Network. Primetime, ABC, head to Death Valley for the Magnolia Bowl. Number 9, Ole Miss. Number 13, LSU. Ole Miss, bounce back win for them, defeating South Carolina on the road. Now, second consecutive road game as they got to go to arguably the toughest place to pick up a win anywhere in the SEC, and LSU, especially Saturday night, Death Valley. LSU, for a 4-1 record, number 13 in the country, they played, I would say, a lot better since the loss to USC. Gus Nussmeier doing a fantastic job being the starting quarterback, replacing Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels. Nussmeier, 1,600 yards passing so far this year, 1,652 to be exact, with 15 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So he is the maestro of this LSU team, and he's going to have a really big game in this matchup Saturday. Meanwhile, like I said, for Ole Miss, Jackson's Dart still putting up ridiculous numbers. Didn't throw a touchdown last week, nor an interception. It's kind of a lower scoring game for Lane Kiffin standards, but we shall see. Should be a fun matchup, Ole Miss, LSU. And the 745 SEC Network, there they are, the darlings of college football last week, the Vanderbilt Commodores, 3-2 on the year, heading to Lexington to take on the 3-2 Kentucky Wildcats. Man, this feels like a Jefferson Pilot game, to be honest with you, if you remember SEC Jefferson Pilot football games. But, hey, for Vanderbilt and Kentucky, I mean, this is not just two, sloppy teams. I mean, Vanderbilt, for what they have done so far this year, kind of changing their philosophy and their style. Diego Pavia, 300 yards of total offense last week for Vanderbilt, helping to pull that upset win. Biggest win in program history, and now can they continue that momentum? Meanwhile, for Kentucky, they've played a lot better on defense since their blowout loss to South Carolina. They're holding their team's opponents to 12 points per game. So, can Vanderbilt kind of get that spread run option going, or can Kentucky's defense shut them down? We'll find out Saturday night as the Doors take on the Cats. All right, let's go across the nation here. We got a lot to cover here. 10:30 ESPN Friday night, a battle in the Big 12. 16th ranked Utah taking on a surprising team in the Big 12, the 4-1 Arizona State Wildcats. Kenny Dillingham's Sun Devils team, like I said, kind of floating under the radar a bit. Picked up a win against Kansas, which seems like Kansas is kind of falling back into reality as they're back at 1-5. But anyways, Cam, I hope I said this name right. Cam Scatbo. I hope I said it right. As I mentioned, 182 yards rushing last week against the Jayhawks. So we'll see if he can continue that. Meanwhile, for Arizona, they took a loss to another team from Arizona, the Arizona Wildcats, on September 28th, 23-10, the final score in that one. So they coming off a bye week. I don't expect to see Cam Rising to play in this game. It seems like every Utah game, he's a game time decision. If not, it's going to be Wilson will be going for the Utes. But late game Friday night, if you can stay up and watch it, it's Utah and Arizona State. All right, Saturday, 3:30 on CBS. As we might as well just call the Big Ten Conference the Rose Bowl Conference at this point. It just feels like these are just Rose Bowl matchups. But anyways, it's new college football. Number 4, Penn State, heading to the Coliseum to take on the 3-2 USC Trojans, 3:30 on CBS. Penn State, second in the nation in quarterback pressures. They pressure the quarterback 45% of the time. As I mentioned, Tennessee, I think they're like 4th. So just kind of give you a comparison there. But we'll see what happens. And, mentioning that, Miller Moss for USC, their quarterback, has thrown for 4 interceptions in the last 3 games. So can Penn State bring that defense to Miller Moss and the USC Trojans? Expect to be a close game, an entertaining game. USC's played some entertaining games. They took a loss last week, I should say, to Minnesota last week on the road, but now they're back home taking on Penn State. So 2 marquee programs in college football with a lot of history and a lot of pedigree meeting Saturday afternoon. 3:30 on ESPN. The undefeated Pitt Panthers, number 22 in the country, 5-0 on the year, taking on the California Golden Bears. Man, Cal just a lot of excitement last week with Cal and Miami, with College Game Day being there for the very first time. And then Cal had a 35-10 lead against the Canes, and Miami storms back, no pun intended, and ended up winning 39-38 over Cal. Now they got to go on the road, jumping 3 time zones to take on Pitt. Pitt, they ended up defeating North Carolina 34-24 last week. I guess that's kind of their biggest win of the year, maybe West Virginia also. They kind of floating under the radar, and they got in the top 25, kind of being undefeated. But, we'll see what happens in this matchup between the Bears and the Panthers. 4 o'clock on Fox. We'll kind of run through these pretty quick, too. Arizona taking on number 14, BYU. BYU, another undefeated team this year. I mentioned it's a 4 o'clock game on Fox. Arizona took a loss last week to Texas Tech, a game that the Wildcats never had the lead in. I don't think throughout the whole game. Just saw Texas Tech going on the road and picking up the win there, so we'll see, can they bounce back? Meanwhile, for BYU, quarterback Jeff Retzlaff leads the team not only in passing but rushing, so he pretty much controls that offense for the Cougars. So we'll see what happens as Arizona meets BYU. 7:30 on NBC. This is the game of the week in the Big Ten or the Rose Bowl Conference. Number 2, Ohio State, 5-0. Number 3, Oregon, 5-0. 7:30 on NBC. Ohio State finally playing a pretty tough opponent. I know Iowa, to some standards, I guess, could have been tough for Ohio State, but they took care of business at home, 135-7. We've mentioned Ohio State before with their offensive players and just the talent they had, but now they got to go on the West Coast and take on the Oregon Ducks. Dillon Gabriel has kind of had an interesting season. His stats are actually really good, but it's just kind of an inconsistent play from him throughout the season. In the win last week against Michigan State, he did have 2 touchdowns, but turned the ball over twice. And I think the week before he had an interception. So what kind of quarterback you're going to get with Dillon Gabriel in this contest between Ohio State and Oregon? Should be a fun matchup. 2 head coaches looking for a big signature win for their resume. And, of course, major college football playoff implications is applied. Oregon and Ohio State Saturday night. All right, couple more games, we'll get you out of here. Another undefeated team, the 11th ranked Iowa State Cyclones, 5-0 on the year, heading to Morgantown to take on the West Virginia Mountaineers, 8 o'clock on Fox. Iowa State, been the surprise team really in the Big 12 with the 5-0 record. They have really done a great job as far as forcing turnovers. Their secondary has 8 interceptions on the year so far. So they really give teams fits as far as that goes. And Rocco Bed, at least, is the quarterback for the Cyclones. Meanwhile, for West Virginia, picked up a big win against Oklahoma State, which an Oklahoma State team that was one time ranked, I think, in the top 10, or at one, they were in the top 10. They have slipped significantly and now unranked. But big win for West Virginia. Looking for a big-time upset win, I think can be doable as Iowa State takes on West Virginia. And then finally, another game in the Big 12. The 18th ranked Kansas State Wildcats. And by the way, I probably should have mentioned this. There's 3 teams this week that's ranked number 18 in the country: Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and there's another team. I forgot who it is. But it's interesting how it all worked out. But point is, 4-1 Kansas State heading to Boulder to take on Colorado. Colorado 2-0 in the Big 12. Kansas State already has dropped a conference game this year. So big time game as far as trying to compete for a Big 12 championship. Kansas State and Colorado Saturday night. All right, that's going to do it for Tailgate Thursday for week number 7. We got another big time week of games coming up next week. We hope you enjoy this week's games of college football action. We'll see you right back here next Thursday for Tailgate Thursday. Until then, enjoy the football.